Good day. This is your friend and brother Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei. We continue our series on leadership for everyone, everywhere. In other words, not the big leaders, but every one of us exercising our potential. And let me say that I will be coming to you every week with this series. We are now on episode 8. Episode 8. And this is a transition from leadership, from leading oneself to managing your life. From leading oneself to managing yourself. Interestingly, this morning, during my quiet time with the Lord, I read a piece by J.C. Maxwell, and that has brought to fore two biblical examples I would like to cite because they are so pertinent. First, I'm reading the October 27th session of J.C. Maxwell Leadership Promise for Every Day, a devotional. And he quotes, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest." Proverbs 6:6-8. And this is a perfect illustration of a minuscule creature which typifies how you can plan and lead yourself and put it into action, day-to-day management. And let me continue with J.C. Maxwell's comment before I add my own. He reads, "Do you want to make a difference? Then pay attention to the metaphor of the ant. It's amazing that one of the smallest of God's creatures can become one of his greatest teachers. The lessons the ant teaches us can be summarized this way. A, attitude of initiative. In self-leadership, you have to take the initiative yourself, not likely to be prompted by somebody." And he goes on to say, ants don't need a commander to tell them to get started. Second, for the ant, nature of integrity. Wow. In other words, they are true to themselves, and they will do what, in their case, instinctively, we must do it on the basis of inculcated values and discipline. Then, and he goes on, and ants work faithfully and need no outside accountability to keep them doing right. What an example of self-leadership. Then the T in the ant, it says, test for industry. Ants work hard and will replace their anthill when it gets ruined. We live in a part of the world whereby people think that when you get to the top, then it's a time to relax. Cool, man. No. True leaders work twice more than even their next hardest one, because you have to think for everybody, you have to inspire others, you have to see them work, and the rest. Leadership requires industry, hard work, great tenacity. And the S, he says, source of insight. He says, ants store provisions in summer. In other words, they think ahead and plan because there will be winter following the summer. In our part of the world, don't be fooled by the sun. There will be the rainy day. What an example of self-leadership. And J.C. Maxwell concludes, and if we consider and learn from the ways of the ant, we can grow wise. In case you think that I'm treating you like an animal, and the small of the animal, there is a real life one. That is Nehemiah in the Bible. He was one of the exiles of the Jews in Babylon. Remember, as a slave, a member of he had no right. He happened to be hardworking and had found a favor. He was the butler to the king. However, while he was there, he heard the news from a visit by his brother Hanani that the condition of the Jews who were left behind in Jerusalem and those who had made the first and second return under Zerubbabel and Ezra were in worse condition than even those who were in the foreign land as captives. What do you do when you hear bad news? Many will wail, yes, throw their hand. Leaders take it to heart and decide to do something about it. In his case, as a man of God, he spent days fasting and praying, asking God to forgive him and the sins of his people, which led to the deportation over 70 years earlier during the time of Jeremiah. And having prayed and fasted for days, of course, he had to go on duty to go and present food and drinks to the king. The king looks at his face and he says, Charlie, what's wrong with you? For us, it is a light thing, but it was life and death situation because a butler, the one who gives the drink, can poison the king. And if the king thinks that your demeanor has changed, he may attribute it to having some clandestine plan to poison or kill him. And that could immediately lead to your death. He gathered courage. Remember, he has spoken to God. He has looked at the fact that God says he will restore the Jews. He was on solid ground. And he told the king, if you were in my position, wouldn't your face be downcast? Probably it could be worse. The walls of Jerusalem, my ancestral home, are down. It's a shame that Ghanaians, especially our politicians, when one is in government, the other wants things worse to happen. No. Whether you are an NPP or an NDC, is not material. The welfare of Ghana will decide on your welfare. So, he says, this is why I am so uncomfortable. And I wish many of us will find discomfort with our status quos, whether at work, in our home, or in the nation, and wanting to do something about it. He took the initiative. The king asked him, and listened carefully. So what do you want me to do? Because he has thought about it, he has planned. He says, give me permission to go and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Ask how long it would take. He gave time to the king. That's not mentioned in the Bible. But you know what? This is a typical bureaucrat. He had thought through. As soon as the king said you can go, he says, Charlie, wait. I need wood. I need a safe passage. I need a cavalry to go with me. I always laugh at some Christians because they think that others are unfaithful because they are not living by faith. No. Ezra said he didn't want any guard. He says, I've told the king that my God is able to take care of me. This is a priest. That is his way. But Nehemiah, being a public servant, was meticulous. He says, I need cavalry. I need soldiers to go with me. I need a letter to inform the governors there. I should follow the protocol. That I need letter to allow me to cut wood from the king's forest. To cut a long story short, Nehemiah went and catalyzed the rebuilding of Jerusalem's wall, took away their shame, and with the help of Ezra, they saw a spiritual revival. They took initiative. But the transition from leadership is that he didn't go with a big dream. When he went there, he mobilized the people, inspired them, and he says, we must get down to work. That's where the management starts. They divided the work, and in 52 days, they did the impossible. The walls of Jerusalem was up. In the ants' case, once they set out, they are going to make sure they will build their ant hills, their six safe heavens. And oftentimes, many people are dreamers. They're able to dream big. They can imagine the status quo is not good. We can move from A to B in their own lives, but they act nothing because they are not able to move from leadership to day-to-day management. Those of my listeners who may be familiar with the literature on leadership, sometimes people inordinately pitch leadership against management. Much is made of leadership versus management, but rightly so, they are different, but they have the same continuum. That means at the end, they are different, but they overlap. Sometimes even good management, of course, can oppose leadership. And it's very, very simple. Why? Because a good manager would have invested his life in the status quo. He oversees the regulations and all. Sometimes I look back to the days when I was leading Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. I thank God that I had my initial board were great men and women of wisdom, and they knew that in order to transform the place, some rules even have to be broken to move from one paradigm to another. That's one of the dangers of leadership. You almost would move, in order to move into a different paradigm, you must disturb the status quo, which are anchored in the rules. So many good managers resist leadership transformation, but they need not to. And when you are a leader, you have to help them to appreciate that, yes, they have invested their life, they have gone to get their MBAs and the rest, but that you are charting a new course and hopefully a better one. On the other hand, you can be, high-flying leader, want to go from A to B and other things, talk big, and nothing happens. That is almost like a typical Ghanaian politician. They promise heaven, and oftentimes they deliver hell. Sometimes when I hear MPs saying that when we go, we are going to develop other things, I say, but an MP, you have no power to develop a district, your constituency. You are appointed to help make good laws, and yet they give the impression, and people buy in, and they get worried why people worry them once they get there. When you are a leader, yes, you must chart the path to a better future. That's a vision with the strategies to get there. But it must be anchored on a day-to-day management. Finances have to be managed. Other than that, you will be where, before you are aware, there's no money. Human resources management. So the leader must also be sure that even though he must disturb the status quo, eventually he must find a new culture and anchor it. So always successful companies, as well we are coming to individuals, will have leadership and management go hand in hand. The leaders lead, and then they inspire to bring the managers, because they need them to anchor leadership paradigm shifts. Therefore, it's always important for leaders and managers to learn how to marry these two, because it's the same way in the family. Someone have said men are made on the Mars and women are made on Venus, but unfortunately they have to be in one marriage. That requires leaders encouraging managers to learn leadership, or at least appreciate leadership thoughts through inspiration, through communication, and gradually, probably, coming to the point whereby they accept the change, which is helpful if you're able to give them, the managers, incentives as to how to go on. And eventually, of course, managers must realign their structures, their systems to the new paradigm. And other than that, they become anachronistic. If they don't give leaders the benefit of the doubt, learn continuously, trust the leadership, and ultimately know that failure is part of change. And if they don't, they will become anachronistic. When I go to New York, I see the Pan Am building, and in Britain there was the British Airways. These were the rulers of the skies, the giant airlines. Today, because they refused to change, they became unprofitable and they all collapsed. This is something that is so important at the national, international level. You will find also that if you don't anchor leadership in management, or management doesn't learn the paradigm shifts, you have trouble. And every now and then, a new country comes, learns from the old countries, and bring in the new ones and overcome. Germany, during Bismarck's time, said in 40 years we would be at the same level as Britain and overtake them, and they did. Then around the turn of the century, Japan came to the scene, and before long, they have captured the world's motor industry and everything else, whilst the other companies were struggling, like Rover and the big cars of Britain. Today, we see the same happening with this country, China, now in the lead industrial hub, as if, the Europeans and the Americans are now doing a catch-up game. No, it's just because if you settle in your mediocrity or the status quo, which I hear is a Latin word, it means the mess we are in, you are in trouble. So how does this all apply to moving from leading yourself to managing yourself? That will be the subject of our next episode, number 9. Moving from leading oneself to managing oneself at the personal level. As usual, this is Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei trying to encourage you to know that you can lead yourself better, and we are talking about leadership for everyone, everywhere. And you can always meet me on ZFM 101.9, and if you miss it, or at your leisure, please don't forget to go to my YouTube site. It is important that we understand how to move from leadership to management, the leadership paradigm, charting the course, but anchoring the changes in a new culture. And that has to happen to you also at the individual level. And that's what I'm going to do next episode. I thank you, and you are welcome again week after week. Shalom, and may the Lord be with you.